Hello?
Hello.
What's up, sir? Give me 1 second.
Sure, no problem, bro.
Thursday, September 10th. We have work together. The people are going to die. Gotta stop it now. Please don't. Season finale, Thursday, September 10th on the CW. Previously on iZombie. You're gonna get me the brain now. Yes, for that boss. They're gone. All my orders. It wasn't crazy. These coolers are full of brains. Zombies are real things. I'm going to kill you all. It is like a cult over there at Max Ranger. There's a secret report that Max Ranger had these seriously dangerous side effects. Their product kills people. The memo does exist. It'll bring Max Ranger to this. Takes a licking and keeps on taking.
I kind of want CPR to face them. Somebody needs to check compressions to the beat of all for the best. From God's stuff. Yeah, let me just rub my DNA all over you. It's not.
Okay, sir.
Hey, no problem, bro.
Dim.
So how's everything going, bro?
Going. Good.
Good. So how's Royal doing?
Busy. The same, pero busy.
It's not bad, man. Not bad at all. So I know that we did risk planning, but I want to go back to risk.
Okay.
I want to start with risk fresh. So that's to see if we can cover risk today. Okay. Let's do. So risk management is the whole knowledge area that deals with risk, right? So there, most of the process for risk are in planning. There's a lot of planning that you do that you do in risk. If you look at five of the processes are in planning for risk. So it's a lot of planning that is related to risk management. So the first definitions that I want you to know is to understand what is risk. So we're on page 310.
Okay.
All right. So what is a risk? It's something. It's an uncertain event or condition that if it happens, it's going to have either a negative or a positive effect on your project regarding the scope, schedule, cost, and quality. So basically, remember that's the definition of risk. I mean, there are going to be several definitions of risk, but for the purposes of PMI and the PMBOK, that's going to be the definition. So it's a uncertain event or condition that if it happens, is going to have a negative or a positive effect on one or more projects or objectives or in the project. So it's going to be related to either scope, schedule, cost, and quality. Okay, so it's also important for you to remember that it can have more than one cause, and it can have more than one impact. A cause may be given a potential requirement, assumption, constraint, or condition that creates a possibility of a negative or positive outcome. Okay, so then they start giving you some examples of it, but basically that's the definition of risk. I want you to know that all projects have risks, all of them. So you have to understand, and why is that? Because especially at the beginning, there's a level of uncertainty rather high in the project. So there's some things that you haven't that you don't know exactly, you don't know 100%. So there's always a level of uncertainty that as the work progresses, that uncertainty level decreases. And therefore, the probability and the impact of the risk is going to decrease as well. But the fact that that there's a high level of uncertainty at the beginning of the project, that means that there's going to be risk involved with a project. Pretty much at all times, all projects have risks. So you have to remember that. If you ever listen to someone say, no, there are no risks in my project, that's not true. That's not the case. You have to dig deeper. I mean, and even some of the risks. I mean, you can, some of them can be identified, but not all of them can be identified. But the fact that you're not able to identify them does not mean that they don't exist. Okay, so you have to understand that there's some risks that are known and some of them are going to be unknown, and even for the unknown, you have to be ready. Even for the unknown risk, you have to be ready, and that's what we're gonna do. So known risks are those that have been identified and analyzed, making it possible to plan responses for those risks. So the ones that are known are the ones that you have been able to identify and analyze, and you are able to provide a response for those risks. And the known risks that cannot be managed proactively, you still need to assign a contingency for them, so a contingency reserve. So you have to put aside. The way that you're going to deal with them is in any way, shape, or form. In order for you to tackle those risks, those known risks, you are going to need resources for that, and then in this case, monetary resources. So you put a reserve on the budget that is going to be that is going to allow you to manage to deal with those risks if they materialize, if they actually happen. When it comes to unknown risks, they cannot be managed proactively because you don't know what they are. However, you have to be ready for them as well. And the way to do that is to have a management reserve. So basically, you put in, what you're doing is you're leaving aside a certain amount of money as part of your total budget just to deal with any unknown risks. And let's say that throughout your project, I mean, no unknown risks materialize, then you don't. That goes back to the budget. So you don't need to use that money. So just a reserve. And usually you gotta go through some authorization process to be able to use that reserve. Okay.
Okay.
So I also want you to know that and the difference between risk and issue. This is important for you to keep in mind. A negative risk that materializes is
Is an issue.
considered an issue. Yes, that's an issue. If it happened and it's negative, then it becomes an issue. Okay. Now, what they tell you here, that's individual project risk might be different from overall project risk. So they're different. You have to look at it from a bigger context. Then they have three important definitions. The risk appetite, and that relates to the organization. That's the degree of uncertainty. Remember that we were talking about uncertainty that is present in the projects. So that's what the risk appetite is, the degree of uncertainty that the organization is willing to take, anticipating a reward. You know, we're ready to go this far and in anticipation of a reward. Okay. Then the risk tolerance is a little bit different. It's similar though. The degree, amount, or volume of risk that an organization is going to be able to withstand. So it's a little bit different than appetite. Appetite is related to the reward, and then the risk tolerance is what they're able to stand. You know, I can't stand the organization or an individual. And then the threshold, the risk threshold. So pretty much it measures on the level of uncertainty or the level of impact that at which a stakeholder may have a specific interest. Below that threshold, the organization will accept the risk. You know, a threshold. I mean, beyond that, then they're not going to be able to tolerate it. But below the threshold, yes, they're willing to tolerate it. Okay. For example, an organization's risk attitude may include its appetite for uncertainty, its threshold for risk levels that are unacceptable, or its risk tolerance, at which point the organization may select a different risk response. Okay. So I want you to understand also, this is the next part is important. Positive risk is called opportunity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to give you an example of a positive risk. I don't know if we brought it up before, but Viagra. Originally, the company that came up with Viagra, that wasn't the intention. During the trials that they were when they were running their during their testing, some of the researchers, they realized that a side effect. Originally, that was a drug intended to help with blood pressure, right? So when they were doing their testing, some of the researchers noticed that a side effect, which was in men, was producing an erection. Actually, for a certain amount of time, a longer erection. So someone noticed that, and that was part of the results. So the lab that was developing Viagra realized, well, we have something here that might change. That's a risk. I mean, but it's a positive risk. It might be an opportunity. So they started doing more research regarding the erection in men, and they were able to realize that the potential, the level of reward was higher, so their appetite grew, and the risk appetite. So they totally changed the focus of the research, and they were exploiting that opportunity. So they started to realize, well, this is a positive risk, so this might change the whole equation. It might not be blood pressure medicine. It might work for erectile dysfunction. So they started doing the research on that, and they ended up coming up with Viagra. So that's what they did. There was this was an opportunity, a positive risk, and they were able to exploit it, which is a response plan for positive risk, and the company ended up having a huge reward. I mean, you know what Viagra is at a world, at a worldwide scale. So that's an example of a positive risk that was exploited. Okay, so my point is, don't think of risk as just a negative thing. So it has a dual connotation. It's both. It can be positive, but it can also be, of course, negative. Or I should say, it can be negative, but it also can be positive. All right. So, but usually the tendency is to focus on the negative risk. You as a project manager, you're most of the time you're going to be focusing on the negative risk, because those are the ones that can affect your project and make it can affect your project. You can affect your budget. They can affect your timeline. So those are the risks that you're going to be mainly focusing on, because those are the ones that can really affect your project, and you want to make sure that those are taken care of. And usually it's the negative ones. And remember that you don't have unlimited resources and time, so you're going to be working on the ones that are on the race that you're going to identify the race that can really derail your project. So those are the ones that you're going to be focusing on. So another thing that is important is that when it comes to risk, everybody should be involved. It's not just the project manager's responsibility. The whole team, the stakeholders, the PMO as a structure, everybody's input is needed in order to properly manage risk. So everybody has to be part of the process. Of course, the project manager is going to document everything, but everybody has to be part of that process. So it's not just up to the project manager. Okay, so having said that, the first process that we're going to cover is plan risk management. Remember that we always start planning. That's usually the first process that we have when it comes to a particular knowledge area. So this is when we're in plan risk management. Basically, what we're going to do is to define the approach. That's what we're going to do. How are we going to define? How are we going to conduct when it comes to risk management activities? That's what we're going to do. So, and the way. So what are the inputs for this process? What are the inputs that we're going to have? Of course, the project management plan. Any subsidiary management plans that are going to be part of that, they should be taken into account because risk information might come from them. The project charter, remember the project charter is a high-level document, but it might provide you some input regarding high-level risks. Stakeholder register, the list of the project stakeholders. Then the your two good friends, the enterprise environmental factors, any risk attitude. There might be some information there. Risk attitude, the threshold, any tolerances, and so you might have some information there. And then any of the organizational process assets that there might be some processes in place regarding risk categories, risk statement formats, standard templates, roles and responsibilities, lessons learned. So within the organizational process assets, there might be some documents that might have some good information there. So how do we plan for it? What do we use? The first technique is you use analytical techniques. They're with this you basically use them to understand and try to define the context of the overall context of risk management regarding the project, which is a combination of the stakeholder risk attitudes and the strategic risk exposure of a given project based on the overall project context. So to give you an example here, a stakeholder risk profile analysis may be performed to grade and qualify the project stakeholder risk appetite and tolerance. So you want to understand your stakeholders' approach when it comes to risk. Where is their appetite? What is their tolerance? You can also use scoring sheets in which you have a high-level assessment of the risk exposure based on the overall project context. So you, based on these assessments, you will be able to allocate the resources to focus on the risk management activities. Kind of understand the approach. Then expert judgment. You also have the input from different sources. You're going to have senior managers helping you, stakeholders, your SMEs that are the project, and you might even have third outside sources like industry groups and professional and technical associations, and even project managers that have worked on similar projects and can get some information from lessons learned too. Another tool and technique that you're going to be using is meetings. You're going to be having a lot of meetings on people just to get their input. But these are meetings that are geared and they need to be focused on the risk management planning effort with an agenda, focusing on that and how you want to make sure that the cost elements are and scheduled activities are part of the agenda. And also you want to bring up the contingency reserve approach that you're going to be following based on the guidelines from the organization. You might use some general organizational templates for categories and risks. So including the probability and the impact. So there are some templates that can help you to drive the discussion. There's a plethora of templates that you can get online, and this is basically to gather that input from the team when it comes to the risk management activities, and you want to identify and also give a probability and an impact. So understanding the probability is basically the chance of that risk of happening, and the impact is usually either high. Is it going to be a high impact to the project, a medium impact, or low impact? and then the probability again high, medium, and low. So you might have a probability, you might have a risk. Let's say that we're building a house, and then you have a risk of rain. So rain is a high probability, but the impact really on the house is not going to be high. It might be a high probability because maybe you're in Florida and it rains a lot, but the impact to the house is not going to be high. I would say low chance of rain. So, but it could have an impact because let's say that you're trying to paint the house, and if it's raining, you're not going to be able to do it. But it's not as the impact is not going to be as high as the one from a hurricane, for example. So a hurricane category 5 can bring the house down. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a high impact. But the probability of a hurricane happening in Florida, well, we haven't had one in 10 years. So and for that, you have to look at historical information, and they're predicting a not active hurricane season this year. So the probability of a hurricane happening this year is not really that high, but the impact is high. So I just wanted you to understand the difference between impact and probability. So the ones that you identify, when you identify your risk, the ones that you're going to really focus your resources are the ones that are high impact and high probability. Definitely, those are you really need to address those as quickly as possible, because those are the ones that can really, most likely they're going to happen, and most likely if they have a high impact, you need to be ready for them. So we're going to be covering that. And then the output. What do we get? We're planning. So the outcome is the plan risk management, or I'm sorry, the risk management plan. So that's what we get, which has the methodology, how the approach is going to be. It has the roles and responsibilities. It has the funds that are needed, the budgeting, and the timing. So you have your whole approach well defined with timing, money, who's going to be doing what, and what is the methodology that you're going to be following. And more importantly, your categories, the risk categories. So and this is for you to be able to group your risk. Remember the work breakdown structure, right? That we were having different the idea of the work breakdown structure was to group into different categories, right, and be able to decompose. So that's the same principle here with a risk breakdown structure. So you have some of the risks are going to be technical, for example. Some of them are going to be organizational. If you look at figure 11-4, some of them are going to be external, some of them are going to be internal. So you start creating the structure. So you come up with this hierarchical representation, so you can have them in categories. This is really important. So you can identify them, and be able to have those categories that are going to allow you to plan properly for risk. Okay, so this is really important. It's usually that's a typical question in the test. So I really want you on page 317. Make sure that you understand that concept of risk categories, and that's part of the risk management plan. Okay, and then like we were talking before, definitions of risk, probability, and impact. The quality and credibility of the risk analysis requires different levels of risk, probability, and impact that are going to be defined in the project context. This is done with the SMEs. This is done with your team. This is done with the experts that you have. So it's really important to have those definitions. And usually it's high, medium, low, high, medium, low. Okay, and then you have on table 11-1, kind of tells you how it shows you kind of a breakdown in regards to with a scale, very low, low, moderate, high, very high, in regards to what it means in regards to cost, what it means in regards to time, what it means in regards to scope and quality. So this is something that you need to measure, right? And then you know, if it's going to be very high in regards to cost, it might mean that your cost is gonna increase in 40% or 30% or more. So that's a problem. That's a risk that really needs to be managed. Then a probability and impact matrix. You have a grid with the two of them, and that's shown. And like we were saying before, high, moderate, or low, and then they're prioritized based on their potential implications. Okay, so if it's high, medium, high, moderate, or medium, or low in regards to impact, and then also in regards to probability. And you're also going to have a revised stakeholders tolerances. Remember that when it comes to risks and throughout the project, everything is dynamic. The tolerances of the stakeholders might change. Why? Because the priorities might change. I mean, the company might be um, shifting priorities based on any conditions. So that's something that you really need to keep in mind. And in order to, so you have to revise that and make sure that you have the the current tolerance of the stakeholders. And then you also need to know how you're going to be reporting on this, the reporting format. Usually they're part of the status report. There's a section that's part of the status report. And very important, tracking. You really want to make sure that you have tracking documents because risk is dynamic. And by dynamic, I mean that it changes. Risk is not static. The risk is always changing and it can come in different ways, shape, or can come in a different way, shape, or form. So it's always changing. So you have to be, in order to be able to, in order to, for you to be ready for it, you have to track it. Okay. So this is where you define what are the activities that are going to be recorded so you can track properly your risk activities. So we once we're able to plan for risk, the next step is to identify. So this is where we determine which are the risks that are going to be affecting your project. Okay. So you have the key benefit of this process is basically that you're going to have documentation of existing risk and the knowledge and ability of that it provides to your project team to anticipate these events. If you know about them, you can anticipate it and be ready for it. That's the key. So for this process, you're going to have several inputs. The first one is the output, I'm sorry, of the previous process, which is a risk management plan. Okay, but also you're going to have more. You're going to have some other inputs as well, and one of the things that I wanted to reiterate here is something that they're mentioning on page 321. Participants in risk identification activities may include the following: project manager, project team members, risk management team, if assigned, customers, subject matter experts from outside the project team, end users, other project managers, stakeholders, and risk management experts. Basically, pretty much everybody and their mother. So everybody should be involved when it comes to risk identification. That's a proactive approach because, like we said before, risk can come in any shape or form, any way, shape, or form. So you have to be able to identify it, and not just you, but the whole team should be part of that process. So identify risks. Also, it's important to know that it's an iterative process, meaning that it has to be done several times. And the reason for that is that risk is dynamic. It's not static. It doesn't stay the same. They might evolve. They might change. So that's why you have to do several iterations to make sure that you're properly measuring and identifying risk. So you have to do it not just once and assume that it's going to stay the same. You have to do it. How often do you do it? It can vary. Sometimes it's done, and you do it at the beginning, of course, but then towards when you have achieved 50% of the project, then you can do another iteration, and then another one towards the end. So you do like 3 times if possible, or even more frequent. Because if you realize that you have a lot of risk that hasn't been that is coming, I mean, it's up to you, but it has to be done not just once. It has to be done more than once.
Okay.
Okay. So you have to also be able to. You have to ensure that you involve the team, because there's gotta be a sense of ownership. They have to be responsible for the risk too. It's when you identify a risk, you're gonna assign a responsible and a person. It's not necessarily the project manager. For some of them you could be, but for most of them you're not gonna be, especially with the technical ones. I mean, it has to be the appropriate resource assigned to that risk. Okay. So the inputs that we have are the risk management plan, obviously, that has the approach. Then, since risk can touch your budget, so you need the cost management plan, because that's how those are the processes and controls to manage the budget of the project. So you need to have that as an input. The schedule management plan, because another risk usually they can affect your schedule, your timeline. So you need to have the processes that define your timeline. Quality management plan, risk can also affect your quality. So you have to understand what are the quality measures and metrics that need to be used in identifying risk. Human resource management plan, risk can also affect your human resources. The scope baseline, because that's where the project assumptions are, and some of the uncertainty in the project assumptions are part of it as well. So these assumptions can be potential causes of project risk. And also the WBS is a very important. It's a critical part of identifying risk, because it facilitates an understanding. It makes it easier to understand risk at a excuse me at a particular point. Just one second. Then the activity cost estimates. They provide a quantitative assessment of the likely cost to complete scheduled activities, and they are useful in identifying risks. Activity duration estimates, also what are the estimate reviews, or then the time allowances that you might have in regards to the project. Then the stakeholder register is also a good input for identifying risk, is to make sure that your key stakeholders are interviewed and part of the process, so they can provide input in regards to identifying risks. Then some of the project documents, you might have some information that could help you identifying risks in the project charter, the project schedule, the schedule network diagrams, issue log, quality checklist, and some any other information that could be useful when it comes to identifying risks. Procurement documents, eh, especially if you're dealing with vendors, there might be some risk associated with that. So you might want to have those documents, those procurement documents available. Then you have your enterprise environmental factors, any published information, any studies, any checklists, any benchmarking, and risk attitude. And your last but not least, you have your organizational process assets when any lessons learned, any formats, templates, and process controls for project files and any data containing that. So what are the tools and techniques that we apply? The first one is documentation reviews. You want to review the documents that you have, the plans, the assumptions, previous project files, agreements, and any other information. So that might be a source for identifying risks. The second one is what they call information gathering techniques. The first one is brainstorming. You get a group of people together and you start working on getting a comprehensive list. At this point, you are just getting a list of project risks. So you have a meeting with them and you with the project team usually, and even people. Some of the stakeholders might be there. Some people are that might be able to provide some valuable information, and then you start providing the categories of risk and kind of working on a risk breakdown structure, and then you start identify risk with them and also putting them in the right category, and you start refining that as much as possible. But that might not be the best, and it's never the only way, because in a brainstorming session, as you know, you might have people that are leaders and some other people that are, the alpha type, the alpha personality, the ones that are going to be dominant. But then you might have some people that are not, that are more shy and reserved. They're not the alphas, but they might have valuable information. So, and you need to capture that data as well. So for this is when a technique comes really handy. It's called the Delphi technique, which is basically a questionnaire that you send to you as a facilitator. You give it to the people, and they provide some privacy, and they can be anonymous. It's actually anonymous. They don't have to go through that. If they're shy people and reserved, they just fill out the questionnaire and then provide some information regarding regarding project risks. So then you have to summarize the responses and then recirculate it with the experts to get any further comment. But then you after a few rounds, you might be able to find consensus. So this is really good for you to reduce the bias in the data, because there's not an alpha guiding the brainstorming might be biased, and you might have an alpha, guiding the discussion, but that doesn't mean that does not mean necessarily that that's the only way. So with the Delphi technique, you might have an unbiased output that can actually help you in identifying risks in a proper way without the bias of having a dominant person get in the discussion. Then you can interview people, one-on-one, get their input. That works with some people. And then you might apply a root cause analysis, which what you're trying to do is to identify a problem, and then you work on finding the underlying causes, or why did it happen, and then you can develop a preventive action. Another tool and technique that you apply is a checklist analysis. So basically, with this, you develop a checklist, and based on historical information, and then so you can have the team to review that and add any information that needs to be added. You also have an assumptions analysis. Every project and its plan, they're developed based on a set of hypotheses, scenarios, and assumptions. So you also can analyze these assumptions and be able to get some risk information from there. Then there's the diagramming. You have a diagram. Some techniques. Cause and effect diagrams. These are known. Okay, I want you to remember something here. Cause and effect diagrams. These has 3 names for the same thing, and they can ask you on their test 3 different ways. Cause and effect, Ishikawa diagram, or fishbone, and they're the same thing. I'm on page 325.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so make sure that you know that, because it's cause and effect diagrams, Ishikawa, or fishbone. They're the same thing. And what you do is you identify the causes of risk. System or process flow charts. They show you how elements of a system interrelate and what is the cause, and then influence diagrams. So these are graphical representations of situations showing causal influence and the order of events and any other relationships among variables. On page 326, you have an example of an influence diagram. And then another tool and technique that you use is the SWOT analysis, which is basically
Strength, weaknesses, opportunities.
opportunities and threats. But you see, opportunities and threats. What is opportunity?
Good.
Positive risk.
And threats, negative risk.
Correct. That's where that comes from. Mm-hmm. So that way you can increase the number of identified risks by including internally generated risks. So the technique starts with identification of strengths and weaknesses of the organization, focusing on either the project, organization, or business area, and then identifies any opportunities for the project that arise from organizational strengths and any threats that are arising from organizational weaknesses. Okay. So the analysis, it examines to which degree to which organizational strengths offset threats, as well as identifying opportunities that might serve to overcome weaknesses. And of course, expert judgment. Okay. You have experts that are part of your team that have enough experience or have been part of similar projects, and they might provide input in regards to the risks that might be associated with this particular project. Okay, so what do we get the output of this process is the risk register, which is just a list of risks. That's what it is. It's a document that has a list of risks. It's a list of identified risks with a structure that describes the risks in regards to what is the actual event, the risk per se. Remember that it was an event or a condition. What is the impact? If there is a cost. So you can describe as much information as possible. And then also the potential responses to a risk. There might be, sometimes they can be identified in this process of identifying risk. Okay, so the list of identified risk and the list of identified risks and the list of potential responses. Okay, so that's those are the first two. Bro, I'm gonna ask you for a favor. Can we do another one? And I'm really tired, man.
I'm gonna tell you if we could do an hour tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that'll be great.
Porque ya estoy mamado.
Yeah. So let's leave it. Let's leave it here. Let's stop right here, and then we can continue with the third.
So por eso te iba a decir, if we can do
Yeah,
an
we
hour
can do
tomorrow.
Yeah, we can do an hour tomorrow.
Entonces, lo que te quería preguntar, so I'm still trying to figure out what the hell I want to do in my life.
Okay.
So creo que voy a ir a tomar el CAPM.
Okay. Okay. That's gonna get you ready, man. That's a win-win.
Porque estaba mirando también the side of a shipboard analyst, technology analyst.
Oh, okay.
Me parece interesante. But eventually be able to do managing my own small projects y eso.
Yeah, that works, man. That's gonna help you. The CAPMs are gonna be a good practice, and then
Eventually go for my PMP.
Yeah, but that's gonna get you ready, and it's mostly definitions. What we're doing right now. That's what we're doing right now.
I took the last test I took. I did costs.
How do you do?
I did okay, but I need a little bit of review on the diagrams for our costs.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I forgot what the S curve and all that was.
Yeah, no, we can do a review on that, a refresh on that.
But the months have been good. Para CAPM, do you know what are the requirements?
High school degree.
I don't have that.
They're not really. I can send you the requirements. You have all of them.
Let me see, because it should be on the PMI, right?
Yeah, they should be. They're really. I mean, anybody can. You don't need the hours for the project.
Oh well. Yeah, do you need 1,500 hours or a high school degree?
Or
No, 1,500 hours and a high school degree, or 23 hours of project management education.
Which you have?
Which I've done with you already, right?
Yeah.
How many do we do? 26? Normalmente when you do the 6 weeks, 26, you said?
See, that's 24, but I might change that to 7. So we're gonna count 7 weeks, and that's 28 hours.
Okay. So yeah, it's 150 questions in 3 hours.
Yeah. And those are definitions.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll be all right.
It's 225 or 300.
Yeah, you want to join the PMI.
Pero holy crap, it's I have to take it every 5 years.
Yeah, but in less than 5 years, it's gonna be
Yeah,
a PMP, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll be fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, mano.
All right. So we'll do it. We'll do it again.
Yo, do an hour tomorrow. ¿A qué horas we get home?
We can do at around 8. I want to do 8 if possible, but if not, 8:30.
No, hey, for me, I would perfect. I mean, 7:30 is fine. Pero what time do you get home?
Yeah, I'm getting home kind of late, man, because
It's a drive,
yeah,
huh?
it is. Yeah, it is. Right now, I gotta see what I'm gonna do with that, but it is. So yeah, like 8:30 if it's okay.
If we can do 8 to 9, that's perfect.
8 to 9. Let's aim for 8 to 9.
Okay, sir.
All right.
Okay, ve, ¿te escribió un amigo Joelis?
Oh yeah, not that I'm aware of. I'm gonna check.
Okay, I'll ask him
I'm
because
gonna check right now.
it.
Yeah, sure. I give him my number too.
Yeah, I gave him your number. That's fine. I'll put that there. Okay, man.
Bueno, brother. Entonces, we'll talk tomorrow, man.
Okay, you have a good night.
You too, man. Thank you.
No, thank you. Bye-bye.